show is gamification, right? So let's take a look at this app that I built specifically for this particular summit experience. I'll move this over here, and please let me know if you see my phone screen just fine. And I'm gonna do this welcome to the real world. Look at that. Who's a Matrix fan, by the way? I know I am. That's like, I've watched that thing like 100 times. All right. So if you see here, I have Neo in the background. I have a different version, but I'm not gonna load that right now. And there's a few things that you can do. So let's see. I can measure, and you can see it here in this room, where I can choose what I'm gonna measure. So as you can see, that grid on the bottom identifies the surface that of the space that we're in. And if you tap anywhere to start measuring, I can then go across the room and capture different measurements of, between different objects. Okay? Now I can go back and probably do something like that. Okay? And I can keep going anywhere I want. But the bottom line is, when I'm done, I can then submit those measurements. And as you can see here, that created a cube. It actually, because I gave it the different size plus a height. So it created a cube for me, or a triangle, QB triangle, whatever, right? And that's what you see. So if you are in a business setting, think of how you could use this. You could actually, in construction, you could measure the spaces that you are supposed to, for example, cube out for an office, and design on top of those real measurements. When I'm done here, I can then hit submit, and then I can say submit. And then those measurements are captured for me, right? Right now it's 4.76. I don't have all the list of measurements, but you get the point. I can capture all the lengths between different segments that I measure. All right? The other thing too is for this app, I have actually set the different unit of measure. I can change the unit of measure, and I can change what I'm measuring: area, distance, free form, or body. Okay? So that's one thing that you can do, and I'll show you guys how to get started with this, by the way. So I'm just showing you the app that I built, but we'll actually land this into something that you can think of. And we can place a cube, and again, this cube, I can determine the different lengths of things, and then same thing. I have a surface here, and this has not been working since this morning. I'm not sure what this is. But if you saw the previous example, you get just the idea of what we're trying to do here. Let me reduce this, perhaps. I don't know. Maybe this is the reason why it's not quite working. Okay. Never mind. The idea then is I can actually place a cube of any size inside this room. What is that good for? Anybody has any idea? Yep. Yeah, that's one example, furniture. Or who wants to actually talk about set up a display for a store or a showroom? Okay. So instead of actually going and getting all the different things and have some guy take it off a truck and put it in the room, you can actually use and leverage mixed reality to get all the stuff for you in place before you get going. Then finally, The other example that I wanted to show you before we get into building it is mixed reality itself. Now, this image, which is the same image of the Endeavor ship that you saw earlier, I've actually stored this in GitHub, and that's where I'm pulling it from. Okay, but you can do this particular ship, moving it around. These are the pin buttons that we were talking about. So the pin buttons are nothing more than a point of reference. Okay, and then you can move this around in the space. I don't know, I lost it. Here it is. Here it is. Here it is. Here it is. Blow it up if I want to, etc., etc. You get the point. But I can also put the ship inside of the space. Okay? And if I want to put it here, I can tap this, and then now I'm seeing this in this particular space. The other thing I can do, believe it or not, is I can walk around it. Right? Yep.
So, are you familiar with load templates in D365?
With what templates?
Load templates?
Yes.
So, in theory, you could pull the dimensions and volumes of loads that an operator is building out for a load template ID. You could pull that data in here, and the operator could stand right next to the truck and virtually build a loadout. Essentially, you could pull in all that data.
Yeah, so
you could pull all
keep in mind that this is specifically for PowerApp, so you would have to build a Canvas application out that does all that thing for you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not, here you're not necessarily, you're not going to get a full app. You would have to build the app.
Do you think a Canvas app would be comprehensive enough to build something like that? With all the functionality that exists?
If I had to take a quick stab at it, I would say yes.
Okay.
You could probably do it.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, I can picture ways to build it. So yeah, I think it can be done.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. So, all right. One more thing that I forgot. So let's see. Let's go back to viewing the real world. What if I actually wanted to capture images of this to send to my marketing team, sitting on the backpack there, where I can then upload these into my Dynamics 365 environment for my marketing team. So see, I've just captured 2 pictures, and those are the 2 pictures that you see in there. All right, so that also shows you how you could do some of that work. All right, so let's break down this application a little bit, now that you are fairly familiar with the idea. Let's see if I can do this from here. Okay, so here we are in PowerApps, and I'll show you how simple some of these things are. It might seem frightening at first, but it's not. Okay, so here's my welcome to the real world app. We'll give it some time to load, hopefully not much. The first thing I want to call your attention to is on the navigation bar, you have a whole set of mixed reality controls that are already in place for you. And strangely enough, they also have under media, if I'm not wrong. Well, I guess I'm wrong. Let's try the image. Oh, here it is. Yeah, so there's the view in 3D control. Okay, so that's the first one we're gonna talk about. So if I go to this particular screen of mine, which is called mixed reality, there's already a control here that I added. That's my view 3D control. Okay. The only thing that you need to have for this particular control is point it directly to the source of the GLB file. And I told you that I had this stored in GitHub, But you can actually store this in SharePoint. You can have it in Azure storage, anywhere you want. Okay? And by the way, that's it. That's all I had to do. Drag this control onto the screen, dimension it, and point it to a source. You don't need to do anything else. How powerful is that? Okay? Now, the view in the real world is nothing more than this control down here, which is this view in MR. And view in MR does allow me to then take that same source, as you can see here, and project it in the physical world. So it actually uses the camera on my phone to identify the space, and does allow me to take that object and put it in that space. Okay? Now, couple other things with view in the real world is you can choose the unit of measure that you want to use as a baseline for this particular control to work with. And you can also define the size of the viewport that you want to use for laying out the object. And now with, when was it, Wave 2, or the spring release actually, they did add the ability to add some pins to it. So those you would add as a collection. Okay, so you can set pins, and those pins would define sort of the different reference points in space for that particular object. Okay, so the way we do that is just by looking at the collection itself. Let's see if we can see here. Let me see advanced properties. There we go. Where I would actually set up the on the mixed reality select. I could then add PowerFX code to move all the pictures into that collection, but somewhere down here as well, I have the ability to associate a collection for the pins that are being displayed in that space. Okay? All right. So let's go ahead and go back for a second. And let's just do new app here. And then we're going to call this Summit in a mixed reality. Okay? For all intents and purposes, I'm going to do a quick phone. And this is going to create a blank app itself. All right. So let's go ahead and then add here in the different controls, the mixed reality, we're going to add the measure in MR. Okay? Then you can select a data source for that, or you can simply, I guess, skip that part of the equation, and you can play this. Oh, I forgot. This doesn't work on your native computer. You have to do that on your phone. Okay, so once you publish this application, I can then leverage my phone to go back and do the same thing. And all I'm doing really is I'm capturing just the different segments that I want, or the volume that I want for something, and moving it into a collection. So who's familiar with working with collections in PowerApps? There you go, a couple guys in the back. So for those of you who are not familiar with collections, you need to just go back and double check, read up a little bit on collections. It's something that that you should have in your arsenal of PowerApps skills, I would say, and in order to build, solid applications that leverage different storage mechanisms. Okay. Unfortunately, this is not necessarily a class on collections, so I would show you quickly here. Kind of what that would look like. So here's my measure screen. And in that measure screen, I have added this measure in real world collection. or measuring the real world object. Now here, if you look at the advanced properties, all I'm doing here is I'm collecting the different measurements from the actual control and checking if they're empty, because I don't want to move any empty values into my collection. So once I capture the image, I'm updating that, or once I capture the measurement, I'm updating that collection to store the values in it itself. Okay? Then all I have done here is added a data control, a data grid control that is actually bound to that collection of measurements. Okay? And that's what displays the different segments inside of the collection itself, or on the screen itself. All right? Then what I've done here is I've actually selected from this drop-down, I've added the different options in this drop-down for area, volume, etc. And then all I'm doing over here in the unchanged is I'm binding that to the unchanged property of the collection, of the control. Okay? All right. In the place a cube, what I'm doing here simply is I'm using the cubing control, and in this cubing control, I'm setting the different, with a slide bar, I'm setting the different measurements that I want for that particular cube in the space that I want to display. So you can actually set the dimensions of that cube before you set it out to project in the real world. Yes, I think you had a question.
Could you measure the thickness of a piece of paper?
I'm sorry, again.
Could you measure the thickness of a piece of paper?
No, not that sophisticated.
Okay. So
Yeah,
there are some limitations to it?
Yeah, I think it's right now 0.1 centimeters, I think is the increment, actually 2 decimals. But I don't think you can get to the point of measuring the thickness of a piece of paper.
Is that on the roadmap? Is that on the roadmap to get more sophisticated in that manner?
I know every day they're actually improving the precision of what you can measure, but I don't know that, I can't say for a fact that that's on the roadmap or not.
Hey, what if you use a high-res camera that zoom in immensely?
Yeah, so let me think about that, because most of the devices that are used nowadays are either phone-based, tablet-based devices. So I don't know that, wait, let me rephrase that. In Windows 11, I know they're actually coming out with something for handling even cameras that you can mount on your actual device. So right now everything is bound to this type of devices, form factors that are tablet-based or phone-based. I know for the next version of PowerApps, they're looking at expanding that into other type of devices. So perhaps you'll be able to get a high-res camera that can, go and measure that type of precision. But it all comes down to the precision that you measure. Okay, so that's the key to be able to measure that type of thickness in very refined thicknesses.
Is there a special formula that you have to have when measuring for volume?
Is there a
in
special
place?
formula?
I mean, because there's different. You could have. I guess I'll think on that question more. My apologies.
If I can guess where you're going with the question is, right now the volumetric objects that you can place are just cube-based. So it would be interesting if we could do things like cylinders or those type of things, but that's not possible yet.
Okay.
Okay? Just to keep that in mind. Okay. Any other questions so far? Okay. All right, so this cube in the real world, what it does then is once you display and you have defined the different measurements of the cube that you're going to place, and all it does is it allows you to capture and images of what that cube looks like in your space. All right? And those images, just like you saw with the ship, you can actually capture those images and send them off to whomever you want. And the way you do that is by moving those images into a collection, right, on the unchanged property of the control. And then you can off that collection into a SharePoint repository or even into Dynamics 365 with Power Automate. All right? And then finally, the mixed reality control. I actually had done this in 2 different ways. So you have you actually view an MR, and I keep in mind here that all you need is the source. And for the control itself, all you need is the source as well. Literally, those are the only 2 things you need. And it has to be a GLB file, as I previously indicated. Okay? Then what you would do is on the onChange property, or on the onSelect property of the mixed reality control itself, you would move all the images that you capture into a collection. And all I did here was I added a gallery that then allows me to bound that collection to the gallery itself, and it displays the pictures. That's all there is to it, with a picture object inside the gallery. Okay? Yeah.
How do you base the measurements of that photo? Can you do that to the PowerApp, like saying that your ship is like 5 meters long versus like 1 meter?
Yeah, so there is a way to do that. And I think that's where pins come into play. Okay? Because pins kind of give you the reference, and you have to define the placement of those pins inside of the model itself when the model is projected. So you would define a collection with the pins, and those pins will have different spatial distributions that you can then use to calculate perhaps the volume of something or how it's placed inside of that particular space. Okay. I suppose if you're using something like the Azure Mixed Reality Foundation, you can get more granular than that. But in PowerApps, it's fairly limited what you can do as far as mixed reality and the ability to control some of those things. Okay.
What if you wanted to, you were in a warehouse and you wanted something up in the warehouse to say, you know, a certain item is right here in that 3D space of the warehouse. Can you do that with it? It's a little.
Oh, now you're getting on the reverse side of it. Okay. So, have you guys heard of AI Builder? So AI Builder is a set of components inside of PowerApp. So actually, they're independent of PowerApps. They're actually a platform level component. And AI Builder, you can train a model to recognize images and to recognize different objects. But you have to train the model. And 5 pictures of each object gets you close. Microsoft recommends 50 pictures of each. Now, that is the training part of the model. Here soon they're coming out with a new set of AI components that are sort of like, what's the best word to use for this? They are predefined to recognize the most common objects in the real world. So you don't have to train a model to do it. Okay? And at that point, yes, you could actually use AI and project or take a camera and point it at something, and it will recognize what the image is or that object is. Now, the real kicker that I would like that I've been asking for is, once it recognizes the image or the object, you can then capture that as a model. So you can then use and leverage the mixed reality components to place it somewhere else if you want to. That's what I'm fighting for. So there should be an ideas out there for that if you guys want to join in I say, yep, that's what I want to see. Okay? Great question. So that brings me to another point. Don't forget about your AI builder components, because there's plenty of object recognition capabilities out of the box that Power Apps allow you to set up using AI builder. Okay? All right. So I think we're getting close to the time, so I want to just go back to the slide deck here. And if you guys want to find out more about these things, you can certainly contact me at your leisure. These are all the different places you can find me. And feel free to, get in touch with me. I'm always available to talk about these things. This is my passion. This is what I like. And certainly, please fill out your emails. Enjoy the rest of the summit. Please stay away from the bars. No, that was no recommendation. But enjoy yourself, enjoy summit, enjoy, especially those of you who are first timers. There's plenty stuff that you can learn here, plenty sessions that you can take advantage of. So thank you for coming by. I appreciate your time.